Some stories don't just get told, they stay with you. And this is one of them. If you love emotional, shocking, real-life stories, welcome. You're going to feel at home here. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and if this story hits you, leave a like. It helps more than you think. Now, let's begin. I never thought my own son would decide where I should live for the rest of my life. But that is exactly what happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon in September. He sat down across from me at my own kitchen table, the same table where he learned to write his name, and he said, "Mom, we need to talk about your future." His voice was calm, too calm. Like he had practiced those words in the car on the way over. I remember thinking, this is not a conversation. This is an announcement. He said, "I have been looking at some places for you. Places where you will be safe. Places where people can take care of you." And I just sat there holding my coffee cup, not saying a word. Because what do you say when your own child looks at you like you are a problem that needs solving? I am 63 years old. I am not sick. I am not confused. I still drive. I still cook. I still know how to balance my checkbook better than he does. But none of that mattered. He had already made up his mind. And the worst part, he did not ask me what I wanted. He did not say, "Mom, what would make you happy?" He said, "This is for your own good." Those 4 words, "for your own good." I have heard them from bosses, from doctors, from men who thought they knew better. But from my son, the boy I held in my arms at 3 in the morning when he had a fever, the boy I worked double shifts for so he could go to summer camp. That boy was sitting across from me, treating me like a piece of furniture that needed to be moved. And I did not scream. I did not cry. I just nodded. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that if I wanted to keep what was left of my life, I could not fight him openly. I had to fight him quietly. I had to become someone he did not expect. A woman who listens, who agrees, who smiles, and then who acts alone. Let me tell you about the life I had before that Sunday. My husband passed away when Michael was only 7 years old. Car accident on a rainy Tuesday. 1 minute he was here. The next minute he was gone, and I was left with a little boy who did not understand why Daddy was not coming home. I did not remarry. I did not even date. There was no time for that. I worked the breakfast shift at a diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then I cleaned office buildings from 4 until midnight. I wore the same winter coat for 12 years so Michael could have new sneakers every fall. I packed his lunches, helped him with homework, went to every parent-teacher conference alone. When he was scared of the dark, I sat by his bed until he fell asleep. When he broke his arm falling out of a tree, I held his hand in the emergency room and did not cry until after he was asleep. I told myself every single day that it would be worth it. That one day, my son would look at me and say, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for everything." And you know what? He did say those words at his high school graduation, at his wedding. On Mother's Day cards, but words are cheap. What matters is what people do when no one is watching. And what Michael did slowly over the years was move me from the center of his life to the edge. First, it was college, then his girlfriend, then his wife, then his job, his house, his children. I became a Sunday phone call, a holiday visit, a checkbox on his to-do list. I told myself it was normal. That children grow up and build their own lives. But the house I lived in, the little house my husband and I bought when we were first married, that house was still mine. It was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, linoleum floors in the kitchen. But it was the only place in the world where I still felt like myself. And when Michael started talking about nursing homes, I realized he was not just trying to move me. He was trying to erase the last place where I had any power. That was when I stopped feeling sad and started paying attention. The real conversation happened on a rainy afternoon about 2 weeks after the first one. Michael showed up with a brown folder full of brochures. Golden Pines, Serene Meadows, Evergreen Gardens, pretty names for places where old people wait to die. He spread them out on the table like he was showing me vacation options. "Mom," he said, "look at this one. 24-hour nursing care, 3 meals a day, activities, bingo, card games, movie nights." He was smiling like he was doing me a favor. I asked him, "Why now?" and he sighed. That sigh, the one that says, "Mom, you are being difficult." He said, "You are not getting any younger. What if you fall? What if something happens? I cannot be here every day. I have a job, I have my own family. I need to know you are safe." Safe. That word again. I looked him right in the eye and I said, "Michael, I mow my own lawn. I carry my own groceries. I am fine." But he would not look at me. He kept flipping through the brochures, pointing at pictures of smiling old ladies playing bingo. And then his wife spoke up. She had been standing by the window, pretending to look at my garden. She said, "This place needs so much work, but the location is prime." That was the moment, right there. She was already thinking about the house, not about me. About what my house was worth. I did not say anything. I just watched them. And then I remembered something I had overheard a few weeks earlier. Michael was in my backyard on his phone. He thought I was napping, but I heard him say, "Once she is in a home, the house can go on the market. Easy money, easy money." That is what my life, my memories, my 30 years of sacrifice meant to him. Easy money. I felt something break inside me, but I did not cry. I did not scream. I just looked at the brochures and said, "Okay, honey, whatever you think is best." He smiled and hugged me. He actually thought he had won. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and I started making a list. Not a sad list. A plan. The next morning, I called an attorney. His name is Frank, and he was a friend of my husband's. I did not tell him everything. I just asked, "Who owns the house?" He said, "You do." "Sole owner." Your husband made sure of that. Then I asked, "Can I sell it without anyone else's permission?" There was a pause. Then Frank said, "Dorothy, it is your house. You can sell it tomorrow. If you want." My heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it through the phone, but I kept my voice calm. I said, "Thank you, Frank. I will call you if I need anything else." Over the next few days, I made more calls. A realtor from church, a bank in a different state, nowhere near Michael. I opened a small account in just my name, not because I had decided to run away, but because I wanted options. I told myself I might not go through with it. Maybe Michael would change his mind. Maybe he would remember who I was and what I had given up for him. But then he came back the following Sunday, and he brought a deposit receipt. He said, "I put down $500 to hold your spot at Golden Pines. You move in on the 15th. Not, would you like to move in on the 15th? Not, let us decide together. You move in on the 15th. That was when I stopped hoping he would change. I looked at that receipt and I looked at my son and I said, "Okay, honey, whatever you think is best." He hugged me again, and while he was hugging me, I was already gone. That night, I called the realtor and told her to list the house. She asked me what price. I said, "I do not need top dollar, I need speed." She said she could have a cash offer in 3 days. I said, "Do it." I started moving small things out of the house, not furniture. That would be too obvious, but the things that mattered: photo albums, my mother's china, a box of letters my husband wrote me when we were courting. I stored them in a rental locker across town, paid cash, left no paper trail. Every time Michael came over to help me pack boxes for the nursing home, I smiled and thanked him. He had no idea that every box he labeled kitchen or bedroom was just for show. The real packing was happening at night when he was home with his family. And every night, before I fell asleep, I practiced what I would say when he found out. Not out loud. The walls have ears, but in my head. The house is sold, Michael. The money is gone. I am not going to Golden Pines. I am going somewhere you will never find me. 3 days before I was supposed to move into Golden Pines, the realtor called me. She said, "Dorothy, I have a cash offer, full asking price. The buyer wants to close tomorrow." I sat down on my porch, looked at the roses my husband had planted years ago, and I said, "Let us do it." She asked me if I needed time to think. I told her I had been thinking for 30 years. It was time to act. I drove to her office that afternoon. The papers were spread out on a big wooden table. I signed my name again and again. Each signature felt like a small door closing. The house on Maple Street. The kitchen where I taught Michael to bake cookies. The backyard where he learned to catch a baseball. The bedroom where I slept alone for 26 years after my husband died. All of it. Gone with a few strokes of a pen. But here is the thing. It did not feel sad. It felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. The buyer wired the money to my new account that same day. I drove to the bank in the next town over, the one Michael did not know about, and I moved every penny into a trust that Frank the attorney had set up for me. No one could touch that money except me. Not Michael, not his wife, not any debt collector who came knocking. That night, I went back to the house and I walked through every room one last time. I did not cry. I just said thank you. Thank you to the walls that kept me warm. Thank you to the roof that did not leak. Thank you to the life I had built alone. The next morning, Michael showed up with his truck. He was ready to move me to the nursing home. He had that smile on his face, the one that said, "I am such a good son, taking care of my mother." He walked into the living room and stopped. The furniture was still there. The boxes he had packed were still there. But I was sitting on the couch with my coat on and one small suitcase by the door. He said, "Are you ready, Mom?" I looked at him and I said, "Sit down, Michael. We need to talk." And for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of my own son. He sat down on the couch across from me, but he did not look comfortable. He looked like a man who knew something was wrong but could not figure out what. I did not waste time, I said, "Michael, I am not going to Golden Pines." He blinked. He said, "What do you mean you are not going?" I told him I sold the house yesterday. Cash offer. The money is in a trust that you cannot touch. He stared at me like I had started speaking a different language. Then his face changed. The confusion turned to something harder. He said, "You cannot do that. It is my house too." I said, "No, Michael, it is my house. Your father made sure of that." He stood up. His voice got louder. He said, "I put down a deposit. I took time off work. I cleared out the guest room for you." And I said, "You did all of that without asking me what I wanted. That is the problem." He started pacing back and forth across the living room. He ran his hands through his hair. Then he stopped and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not anger anymore. It was panic. He said, "Mom, you do not understand. I have debts. The business is failing. I was going to use the house to pay off the loans." There it was, the truth. Not I was trying to keep you safe. Not I was worried about you falling. I have debts. I needed your house. I sat very still and I let those words hang in the air. Then I said, "I know. I heard you on the phone in my backyard. You said once she is in a home, the house can go on the market. Easy money." His face went pale. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He was still my son. But then I remembered the brochures, the deposit receipt, the way his wife looked at my curtains, and the sorry feeling passed. I stood up, picked up my suitcase, and walked toward the front door. He followed me. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Somewhere I will not be a burden." He grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough to make me stop. He said, "You cannot just leave. You are my mother." I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked at his face. I said, "And you are my son, but you chose money over me. And that is something I cannot forget." I walked out the front door and I did not look back. My old sedan was parked in the driveway. I put my suitcase in the passenger seat and I got behind the wheel. Michael stood on the porch, yelling something, but I could not hear him anymore. The engine started. I pulled out of the driveway, past the roses by the mailbox, past the oak tree where Michael used to hang a swing, past the street sign that said Maple Lane. I drove for hours. I did not have a destination. I just knew I needed to get far away. The sun was setting when I crossed the state line. I found a small town with one stoplight and a diner and a motel that rented rooms by the week. I paid cash for 7 nights. The woman at the front desk did not ask any questions. I liked that. The room was small and a little musty. The bedspread was the color of stale coffee, but it was quiet and no one knew where I was. I sat on the edge of the bed and I finally let myself feel everything. Not regret, not guilt, just exhaustion. Deep, bone-tired exhaustion from years of giving and giving and getting back so little. My phone buzzed in my purse. Michael, then again, then again. Then a text message. "Mom, please call me. We need to fix this." I read the message 3 times, then I turned my phone off. Not because I was angry, because I needed silence. I needed to remember what my own voice sounded like without someone else telling me what to do. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No one was coming to check on me. No one was measuring my house for new curtains. No one was telling me what was for my own good. I woke up to birds singing outside the window, sunlight coming through the cheap curtains. And for the first time in a very long time, I did not feel like a ghost in my own life. I made coffee in the little machine in the room. I sat by the window. And I started thinking about what came next. Not what Michael wanted, not what the doctor said, what I wanted. I had not asked myself that question in decades. A few weeks later, I found a small house. Not big, just 2 bedrooms on the edge of another small town. The garden was overgrown and the porch needed painting, but I could see what it could become. I paid cash from the sale of the old house. No mortgage, no paperwork for anyone to track. Frank, the attorney, helped me set up the trust so the deed did not have my name on it. He said, "Dorothy, you are being very careful." I said, "I am being smart. There is a difference." I painted the porch myself. It took me 3 days, and I was sore in muscles I had forgotten I had. But every time I rolled the brush across the wood, I felt something healing inside me. I planted new roses by the mailbox, not because I was trying to recreate the past, because putting things in the ground felt like believing in the future. I joined a small church down the road, nothing fancy. Just a few old ladies who played cards on Tuesday nights and did not ask too many questions about your past. They called me the new woman in town. They did not know about Michael or the nursing home or the house. They just knew I made good pie and did not talk too much. It was peaceful. And peace, I learned, is not the same as happiness. Happiness comes and goes, but peace is the absence of fear. For the first time in years, I was not afraid. Michael kept calling at first. Then his wife called. Then his wife's mother called. The messages started out angry. "How could you do this to us?" Then they got sad. "Mom, we are so worried about you." Then they got manipulative. "What would Dad think?" That last one hurt. My husband would have hated this. He believed in family, in forgiveness, in working things out. But my husband was not here. He did not see the look in Michael's eyes when he said easy money. He did not hear the way Michael's wife talked about my house like it was already theirs. So I let the guilt come. I let it wash over me. And then I let it pass, because I figured something out. You can love someone and still protect yourself. You can forgive without forgetting. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop letting them take advantage of you. 6 months passed, then a year. Michael stopped calling around month 4. The last message he left was different from the others, quieter. He said, "I get it, Mom. I was wrong. I just wish you would tell me you are okay." I kept that message. I listened to it sometimes at night when the house was dark and the doubts crept in. Was I being cruel? Was I punishing him for something he did not fully understand? But then I would remember the folder, the brochures, the deposit receipt, the way he grabbed my arm on the front porch. And I would remember something else too, something I had not told anyone. A few months before that Sunday conversation, Michael had asked to borrow money, a lot of money. $15,000. He said it was for the business. He promised to pay it back in 6 months. I gave it to him because he was my son and I wanted to believe in him. He never paid it back. He never mentioned it again. That was the real clue, not the nursing home, not the deposit, the money. He saw me as a bank account with a heartbeat. And when he could not withdraw what he wanted, he decided to sell the ATM. I finally called him on a Tuesday. The same day of the week he used to come over before everything fell apart. I do not know why I chose Tuesday. Maybe because it felt familiar. He answered on the first ring. He said, "Mom." His voice cracked. I said, "I am okay, Michael." He started crying. I had not heard him cry like that since he was a little boy with a fever. He said, "I am so sorry. I messed everything up." I did not say it is okay, because it was not. I did not say I forgive you, because I was not there yet. I just said I am safe, I am healthy, and I am happy. He asked where I was. I did not tell him. He asked if I needed anything. I said no. He asked if we could meet. I said maybe someday. Then I said goodbye and hung up. That was it. No dramatic reunion, no big speech. Just two people on a phone, miles apart, both realizing that some things cannot be undone. I am 65 years old now. 2 years have passed since that Sunday afternoon at the kitchen table. The little house with the painted porch is home. The roses bloom every spring. I play cards with the ladies on Tuesday nights. I go to church on Sundays. I bake pies for the neighbors. Sometimes I think about Michael. I wonder if he is okay. I wonder if his debts got paid. I wonder if he tells people about his mother, the one who disappeared, the one who sold the house out from under him. Maybe he tells them I was crazy. Maybe he tells them I was cruel. Maybe he tells the truth, that he tried to put me away for money and I would not let him. I do not know, and honestly, I do not need to know, because here is what I learned. Silence is not weakness, it is strategy. Kindness is not stupidity, it is a choice. And forgiveness is not the same as letting someone back into your life. I still love my son. I always will. But love does not mean I have to be a doormat. Love does not mean I have to sit in a nursing home playing bingo while he sells my memories for cash. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk away. Not in anger, in peace. People will tell you that family is everything, and it is. But you know what else is everything? You. Your peace, your life, the years you have left. I spent 30 years giving everything to my son. I do not regret it. But I spent 2 years giving something to myself. And I do not regret that either. So if you are listening to this, and you are older, and you are scared, and someone is telling you what is for your own good, remember me. Remember the woman who sold her house, drove across the state line and started over. Not for revenge, for freedom. For the first time in years, I am not a burden. I am not a guest in someone else's plan. I am not quiet because I have nothing to say. I am quiet because I have said everything I needed to say. And now I am just living. And that is the best revenge of all. You might think that after I hung up the phone that Tuesday, the story ended. But life does not end. It keeps moving like a slow river, and you either move with it or you drown. I chose to move. After that phone call with Michael, I did not hear from him for several weeks. I thought maybe he needed time to sit with what happened. Maybe he was angry again. Maybe he was sad. I did not know, and I decided that was not my problem to solve. I had spent too many years carrying his emotions like they were my own, so I focused on the small house. The garden was coming along nicely. The roses I planted by the mailbox had grown taller than I expected. I started going for walks every morning, just around the block, waving at neighbors who were starting to recognize me. One of the ladies from the church, a woman named Ruth who is 72 and still volunteers at the food bank, invited me to dinner at her house. She made meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the kind of meal I used to make for Michael when he was growing up. We sat at her kitchen table and talked about nothing important. The weather. The price of eggs, her grandson who just started college. It was simple and easy and exactly what I needed. For so long, every conversation I had was heavy, full of unspoken things, guilt, obligation. The weight of being someone else's responsibility. But with Ruth, there was none of that. She did not know about the nursing home or the house or the money. To her, I was just Dorothy. The new woman who made good pie. That felt like a gift. That night, I went home to my little house, made myself a cup of tea, and sat on the porch. The street was quiet. A few houses had their porch lights on. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, and I thought to myself, this is what peace feels like. Not excitement, not joy. Just the quiet certainty that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. A few months into my new life, something unexpected happened. I received a letter, not an email, not a text, an actual letter handwritten in an envelope with a stamp. I almost did not recognize what it was. No one writes letters anymore. The return address was Michael's. My hands shook a little as I opened it. I sat down at my kitchen table and read his words slowly. He wrote, "Mom, I am not writing to ask for money. I am not writing to ask where you are. I am writing to tell you that I have been seeing a therapist. I did not even know what a therapist was until 6 months ago. But my wife said I needed help, and she was right. I have been thinking a lot about what I did, about the nursing home, about the house, about the way I treated you like a problem instead of a person. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am just asking you to know that I am trying to be better. I read that letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the drawer with my mother's china and the letters my husband wrote me. I did not write back right away. I needed to think. Part of me was glad he was getting help. Part of me was skeptical. I had heard apologies before. I had heard promises before, but words are cheap, and I had learned that lesson the hard way. Over the next few weeks, I thought about what I wanted, not what Michael wanted. Not what society said a good mother should do, what I wanted. And I realized that I was not ready to let him back in. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I was ready to write him a letter, just a short one. Just to let him know that I received his message. So I wrote, "Michael, I am glad you are getting help. I am safe. I am healthy. I am happy. That is all you need to know for now." I did not sign it love. Mom, I just signed my name, Dorothy, because love is not automatic. Love is built. And right now, the foundation is still too cracked to stand on. The letters continued. Not every week, maybe once a month. Michael wrote about his therapy, about the things he was learning, about how his therapist asked him to write a letter to his younger self, apologizing for not protecting him from something that happened in his childhood that I did not even know about. He wrote about his marriage, about the fights he and his wife were having, about how the money problems had not gone away, but he was trying to handle them differently. Each letter was a small window into a life I used to be part of. And each letter made me feel something I did not expect. Not guilt, not sadness, just a quiet curiosity. Who was my son becoming? Was he really changing, or was he just learning new ways to say the same old things? I did not know, but I kept reading. And I kept not responding, not because I was being cruel, because I was being careful. Trust is not rebuilt with a few handwritten letters. Trust is rebuilt with years of different behavior, and Michael had only given me a few months. One evening, Ruth came over for dinner. She brought a casserole. I made a salad. We ate on the porch because the weather was warm. She asked me if I had children. I paused. Then I said, "I have a son, but we are not close right now." She did not ask why. She just nodded and said, "That is hard." I said, "Yes, it is." And then we talked about something else. That is the thing about real friends. They do not force you to explain yourself. They just sit with you in the hard places and do not make it worse. That night, after Ruth left, I thought about what it would be like to see Michael again, to look him in the eye, to sit across from him at a table without brochures, or deposit receipts or talk of nursing homes. I did not know if that would ever happen. But for the first time, I did not close the door on the idea completely. I just left it cracked open, just a little. A year and a half after I left, I decided to take a trip. Not to see Michael, just to see something new. I had not been anywhere in years. When my husband was alive, we used to drive to the mountains every fall. After he died, I stopped traveling. There was no money for it, and then there was no energy for it. But now, with the money from the house and no one telling me what to do, I could go anywhere I wanted. I chose the coast, a small town on the ocean, about 6 hours from my little house. I rented a room in a bed and breakfast run by a woman named Carol, who was 82 and had more energy than I did. Every morning, I walked on the beach. I collected shells. I watched the waves and let my mind go empty. It was strange at first, not thinking about anything. My whole life, my brain had been full of lists and worries and plans. But on that beach, with the salt air in my hair and the sound of the ocean in my ears, I learned how to be still. I thought about my husband, about the way he used to laugh, loud and free, like he had no idea that life could be hard. I thought about Michael as a little boy, running through the sprinklers in the backyard, shrieking with joy. I thought about the woman I used to be before I became just someone's mother, just someone's widow, just someone's burden. And I realized that woman was still there. She had just been hiding for a very long time. On my last day at the beach, I sat on a bench and watched the sunset. An older man sat down next to me. He was probably 70, with gray hair and kind eyes. He said, "Beautiful, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, it is." We did not exchange names. We just sat in silence and watched the sky turn orange and pink and purple. Then he stood up, tipped his hat, and walked away. I never saw him again. But that moment reminded me that the world is full of people and moments and possibilities. And I was still alive enough to experience them. When I got back from the coast, there was another letter from Michael. This one was different, shorter. He wrote, "Mom, I know you are not ready to see me. But I want you to know that I am not the same person I was 2 years ago. I am not asking for the house. I am not asking for money. I am just asking for a cup of coffee, somewhere neutral, somewhere you feel safe. You can bring a friend if you want. You can leave after 5 minutes if you want. I just want to look at you and say I am sorry in person." I read that letter 7 times. Then I called Ruth. I told her everything. The nursing home, the house, the money, the letters. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I do not know." She said, "Then do not decide today. Sit with it for a while." So I did. I sat with it for 2 weeks. I thought about the boy who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. I thought about the man who tried to put me in a home so he could sell my house. I thought about the letters he had been writing, month after month, with no guarantee that I would ever respond. And I thought about myself, about the life I had built in the little house with the painted porch, about the roses, about Ruth, about the beach. I realized that I was not afraid anymore, not of Michael, not of being manipulated, not of being hurt, because I had something I did not have before, a life of my own, a foundation that did not depend on him, and from that place of safety I could take a risk. So I wrote back, just one sentence. Okay, coffee, I will tell you where and when. I chose a diner halfway between my town and his, neutral ground, a place I had never been before, so no memories would haunt me. I arrived 30 minutes early. I wanted to be sitting down. When he walked in, I wanted to see his face before he saw mine. I ordered coffee and waited. The bell above the door rang at exactly the time we agreed on. Michael walked in. He looked older, thinner. There was gray in his hair that had not been there before. He looked around the diner, and when he saw me, he stopped. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked over to the table and stood there, like he was waiting for permission to sit. I said, "Sit down, Michael." He sat. The waitress came and asked if he wanted coffee. He said yes, thank you, and his voice was soft. Not the voice of the man who had spread brochures on my kitchen table. A different voice, a humbler one. We sat in silence for a long time. The waitress brought his coffee. He wrapped his hands around the cup like he was cold, even though the diner was warm. Finally, he spoke. He said, "Mom, I do not have a speech. I practiced one in the car, but I forgot it. So I am just going to say it. I was wrong about everything." I looked at him. I said, "Tell me what you were wrong about." He took a deep breath. He said, "I was wrong to treat you like a problem. I was wrong to put a deposit down without asking you. I was wrong to think about the house as my money. I was wrong to make you feel like you had to run away to be free, and I am sorry." He did not cry, but his eyes were wet. I sat there for a long moment, holding my coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into my hands. Then I said, "I believe that you are sorry. But sorry is a feeling. Changed behavior is a fact." He nodded. He said, "I know. That is why I am still in therapy. That is why I am still writing letters. I am not asking you to trust me. I am just asking you to let me try to earn it back." We stayed at the diner for 2 hours. We did not fix everything. We did not even try. We just talked about small things at first. His children, my garden, the weather. Then, slowly, we talked about bigger things, about his father, about the years after the accident, about how hard it was for both of us, even though we never said it out loud. Michael told me something I had never heard before. He said, "Mom, after Dad died, I was angry at you. Not because you did anything wrong, because you were the only one left. I could not be angry at Dad because he was gone, so I was angry at you. And I carried that anger for decades. I did not even know I was carrying it. I just knew that something inside me was always a little bit cold toward you." I sat very still. I wanted to cry, but I did not. I said I was angry too, not at you, at the world, at the unfairness of it. But I did not know how to talk about it. So I just worked and worked and worked, and I told myself that if I gave you enough, you would love me enough to fill the empty place. He reached across the table and put his hand on mine. He said, "I am sorry I could not fill it. I am sorry I made it emptier." I looked at his hand on mine. The same hand I had held when he was a baby learning to walk. The same hand that grabbed my arm on the front porch. I did not pull away, but I did not squeeze back either. I just let it rest there. And I said, "We cannot go back. We can only go forward. And forward looks different than I thought it would." He nodded. He said, "I know. That is okay. I will take whatever forward you are willing to give me." After the diner, I drove home in silence. No radio, no audiobook, just the sound of the tires on the road and my own thoughts. I thought about the last 2 years, about the fear and the anger, and the loneliness, about the quiet mornings on my porch and the roses by the mailbox, about Ruth and the card games and the church, about the beach and the sunset and the old man who tipped his hat. I had built a life, a small one, a quiet one, but it was mine. And I was not going to give it up, not for Michael, not for anyone. But I also realized that I did not have to give it up. To let him back in a little, the door could stay cracked open, not wide, just enough to see each other through. A few weeks later, Michael called and asked if he could come to my town, not to my house. He knew I was not ready for that, but to the diner near my church. He said, "I would like to meet your friend Ruth. I would like to see where you live, even if I cannot see the actual house." I thought about it, then I said yes. He came on a Saturday. Ruth met us at the diner. She was polite but cool. She had heard the whole story, and she was protective of me, in a way no one had been in a very long time. Michael was on his best behavior. He asked Ruth about her life, her family, her garden. He did not talk about money. He did not talk about the house. He just sat there and listened. Afterward, as we walked to our cars, he said, "Ruth is good for you." I said, "Yes, she is." He said, "I am glad you have her." And I could tell he meant it. That was the moment I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, he really was changing. Not because he said the right words, because he was willing to be a small part of my life instead of the center of it. Over the next year, Michael and I developed a new rhythm. We met once a month at the diner halfway between us. Sometimes Ruth came. Sometimes he came alone. We talked about his kids, my garden, his work, the books I was reading. We did not talk about the past very often, and when we did, it was not to rehash the pain. It was to understand it. He told me more about his therapy, about how his therapist helped him see that he had been trying to fill his own emptiness with money and things, and that never works. He told me about the guilt he carried, not just for what he did to me, but for the way he had been showing up in his own marriage, his own parenting. I listened. I did not rescue him. I did not say it is okay. I just listened. And in the listening, something healed in me too, not completely. Some wounds never completely heal, but enough. Enough that I stopped waking up in the middle of the night with my heart racing. Enough that I stopped flinching when I heard a truck that sounded like his. Enough that I started to think of him not as the villain in my story, but as a flawed person who had made terrible choices. and was trying to do better. One day, Michael asked if he could come to my house. Not to stay, just to see it. I said no. He said, okay. Maybe someday. I said maybe, and that was enough. Because I was the one holding the boundary now, not him, and that made all the difference. I am 68 years old now. The roses by the mailbox are taller than me. Ruth and I still play cards every Tuesday. I still go to church on Sundays, and Michael still writes letters. Sometimes he calls. Sometimes we meet at the diner. It is not the relationship I imagined when he was a little boy, but it is a real one, built on honesty instead of obligation. And that is worth more than all the forced hugs and holiday visits in the world. If you have been listening to this story from the beginning, you might be waiting for a dramatic ending. A final confrontation. A moment of forgiveness where we both cry and hug and everything goes back to the way it was. That is not what happened. Life is not a movie. Healing is not a straight line. Some days I wake up and I am at peace with everything. Other days. I remember the look on Michael's face when he said easy money, and I feel a cold anger in my chest. I do not push it away. I let it come. I let it sit with me. And then I let it go. Because anger is a visitor, not a resident. I have learned that I can love my son and still be angry at what he did. I can forgive him without forgetting. I can let him back into my life without letting him back into every part of it. That is what they do not tell you about forgiveness. It is not a light switch. It is not something you decide once and then it is done. It is a practice, a daily choice, and some days you choose it. And some days you do not. Both are okay. The most important thing I have learned is this. I am not a burden. I was never a burden. I was a woman who gave everything she had to her child. And when he tried to take the rest, she said no. That is not cruelty. That is survival. So if you are listening to this and you are older and you are scared, and someone is telling you what is for your own good, remember, you have a voice, you have options, you have the right to your own life. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. For the first time in years, I am not a burden. I am not a guest in someone else's plan. I am not quiet because I have nothing to say. I am quiet because I have said everything I needed to say. And now I am just living. In a small house with a painted porch and roses by the mailbox. With a friend named Ruth and a son who is learning to do better. It is not perfect, but it is mine. And that is the best revenge of all.